Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for connecting with us. Welcome to today's Enterprise Skills Session. My name's Edward. I'm Innovation Manager here at Robert Gordon University. Hopefully you're connected to your devices. These sessions are hopefully just going to be quick, fun lunchtime sessions to give you an introduction to some practical skills, whether you're already an entrepreneur developing a business or you're working and you're looking to build your additional skills. Hopefully you'll get an opportunity to ask questions, to get some practical advice, and to connect with some other people as well. So today's session, quite an interesting one, all about developing websites or apps. Where do you get started? What do you have to do? And we're delighted to be joined by a lecturer here from the School of Computing, but also a former participant of our Startup Accelerator, Kyle Martin, who will talk you through some of the methods and techniques, but also give you a chance to ask some questions and explore this topic, which is so fundamental to so many modern businesses today, particularly in the digital tech side of things. So I'm going to hand over to Kyle, who can hopefully share his screen and introduce you to what we're going to be discussing in today's session. Over to you, Kyle.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. As Ed said, everybody, I'm Kyle. I really look forward to hosting you on today's session and giving you a bit of a glimpse into what I think is a very cool subject, and hopefully many other people think is a cool subject. I would guess that's hopefully why you're here. So I'm just making that awkward small talk while I share my screen and find the right window that I'm going to be sharing. And so today we're going to be talking about designing websites and apps. Now, before we start, what I want you to do for me is I want you to think about the last time you used a really, truly phenomenal website, right? Get that firm in your mind. Think about the last time you used something that was really, really impressive. Now I want you to think of the last time you used a truly rubbish website or app. And one thing that tends to happen when I ask people to do this is they tend to think of the really bad website or app much more quickly, and they're able to pick that up in their heads much faster than the last time they used a truly great one. And that's one of the important things I'm here to talk to you about today. When you're putting your business out into the world, you want to be leaving people with a good impression. However, if you have a really poor digital presence, now be that in the form of a website or be that in the form of an app, you will be remembered, but perhaps for all the wrong reasons. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's kind of a lot on the web now. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. Well, okay, I am. It's part of the job. But there are about 1.9 billion websites. And this is reasonably recent information. This is August 6th, 2021. 1.9 billion websites, and around about, if I remember correctly, Google indexes about 30 trillion individual web pages. So there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of competition for digital retail and for maintaining people's attention on the web. It's not as easy as some people might think. So what am I going to talk to you about today? Well, what I'm going to talk to you about today is a bit about structuring content on a web page or app to make people actually want to use it. I'll talk a bit about usability and accessibility and why you should care about these two very, very important words. And then finally, I'm going to talk about some prototyping skills. And you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, Kyle, this sounds like you've adapted a lecture from a module that you run on website design and development, but that this lecture is aimed more towards students who are looking at growing up to be developers. And you'd be partially right, but you'd also be partially wrong. So I'm usually in the business of teaching students who want to grow up to develop, but not grow up, sorry, to develop their skills in order to be able to develop their own website. However, I think it's really interesting to look at this from the client perspective as well. So a developer's job is to take a client's vision and make it real. You guys all have your own businesses. You've all got things that you, either products you want to market, services you want to offer. You've got something you feel you can give to the wider world. However, in order for the world to know about it, you need this digital web presence, and you probably need someone to build it for you, unless you've got some expertise yourself. Your role in this partnership is to describe your vision in enough detail to your developer that they can actually make something that is useful. And if you can't describe your vision to a developer, then you probably can't describe it to the public either. And if you can't describe it to the public, you're going to end up with a digital presence which is not very indicative of what you actually want to be or what you want to do with your business. And this is really important. So why am I giving you this? Well, it helps to know a bit about what is possible, because from as early on as possible, you should be thinking about, how is my business reflected in the real and the digital world? So we'll start with structuring content. Now, good web pages and apps, sub-in apps or web pages, whenever you hear me talk about one in isolation, they generally follow a design principle called the hierarchy of information. Most important general information is usually screaming somewhere at the top, with the slightly less, more specific information a little bit smaller, a little bit lower down. And much more granular, extended information a little bit smaller, a little bit lower down. And the highly detailed information even further down the page, even further down. This creates a sort of upside down triangle, which we popularly call the hierarchy of information, right? And you can see this everywhere. If you look at websites, and if you look at newspapers, sorry, you'll see that we are going all the way back to 1969. It's as true now as it was then. You have the really important information at the top, man on the moon. You've got the subtitle saying this is a message from Earth, and then you've got the more granular information, this sort of upside down triangle. And this isn't just one example I've picked because it fits. There are plenty of examples, and no doubt after this lecture, I always have to hide my Illuminati theory because I spend most of my time noticing these things when I go out into public media again, whether that be newspapers or whether that be the digital realm. Now, the reason that we present information in that sort of way, it's quite interesting, actually. It's become somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because people have got so used to the most immediate information or most important, most general, being in easy access, your reading attention has actually developed and changed over the last half century or so, so that you prioritize where you pay attention. So what I'm saying in this is effectively the layout of a web page should match the information flow. And this leads to what's the so-called F layout for web pages and apps. Generally, people will start at the top left of the screen, will move from left to right, and they'll probably go along every piece of content in the left to right. Then move down and they'll go about across a little bit less. And this pattern will proceed all the way down the page, with people reading your full top line of your web page, maybe most of the second line, but by the time they reach the fifth or sixth, they're really paying only attention to the first word or maybe the section heading. A good piece of evidence to this is if you guys are ever interested on how many people go through to the second page of Google, I'll give you a quick hint. It's not a lot. And so you can see this very much resembles the hierarchy of information we were talking about, where your general information should be at the top of the web page, and it should be growing more specific, where people can just sort of skim through to identify what they want to find as they move down. This has been adapted to something called the Z layout in very sparse web pages, where people will dot from the left and right of the page up and down in a Z-like motion. And there are other layout styles as well that have been popularized by various media, both print and digital, such as free column, which we pull from newspapers, and the grid layout that we pull from YouTube. Well, why might I be talking to you about this? Because immediately you should be thinking about what your users want from your website or application. What is it that you consider to be the main piece of information or the main service you offer, the main thing you want people to learn about your business when they visit your digital presence, be that a website, be that an app, it doesn't really matter. And you want to make that functionality super obvious by making it very large, very central, very near to the top, very close to the first thing that people will see when they start at the top of your page. And as the information or the functionality gets less important, you can move it slightly smaller, you can move it slightly closer to the bottom. So that's take-home message number one. What I want to then touch on is usability and accessibility and why you should care about them. Well, what do these two things mean? Perhaps would be a good way to start. Accessibility means an individual's ability to access something. So it really refers to how usable is your website or your application for someone with a reduced ability to access that site. These can be many different barriers, and I'll give you a couple of examples in a second. However, usability refers to ability to use, sorry. And this more is aimed at how easy to use is the site in general. Generally, this term refers to the ability to use a site by anyone. So you can see they're closely tied there, but they're a little bit different. When we talk about usability, we usually talk about things like functionality. Does everything work? Are the files in a readable format? Most importantly, can someone achieve what the site is intended to be used for? It also refers to whether the site's understandable to the user. Is this more the design? Does everything work as expected? Can a user understand how to navigate the site? Now, hopefully, by this point, you've already had the multiple speeches about how important it is for you to understand your customer. Usability is just the phrase by which we mean make sure that your digital presence is understandable and functional for the customer that you believe you have. Accessibility then is where you have to be a bit more careful and be mindful that not all users can access your website in the same way. Accessibility refers to a broad spectrum of accessibility needs. These can be visual, i.e. people who interact with websites or applications in different ways because they're visually impaired or they have color blindness. It can be cognitive because they have issues of memory, fluid intelligence. Physical, they might not have the fine-grained motor skills to use, say, a trackpad or a mouse or a touch screen for that matter. Communication, including hearing, talking, reading, expression. This is a broad one that covers both dyslexia and deafness, for example. Emotional, relating to issues of anger and despair, or intersectional, relating to all issues where they intersect. Particularly these last two can be a bit difficult to grasp, and you're maybe sitting there thinking, well, why on earth should I be caring about what sort of emotional state my users are in when they access my service? My favorite example of this in the real world in an industry and with still long felt ramifications is when Bing was introduced as a competitor to Google. Rather morbid note, if you were to Google the exact phrase is something along the lines of most effective forms of suicide, Google would not tell you. Google would instead signpost you to the various self-help organizations that exist to try and support you through that. When Bing was first introduced, however, Bing didn't do that. Bing gave you a numbered list with a probability of survival related with different methods. And to this day, this has not been forgotten about in the online world, and Bing's reputation has suffered. Now, it might not just be a reputation thing. It might not just be a thing that makes your users. There are actually legal ramifications about making your digital presence accessible. So I won't go through all the text on this slide, but recently, a couple of years ago now, there was a blind plaintiff who sued the American grocery store Winn-Dixie because he complained that he could not make use of their website because there was nothing to support him because he was blind. Winn-Dixie's defense basically was, meh, it's not our problem. He's blind. We don't have to make it. We say that, you know, you can use our site if you can use it. The American courts disagreed. The American courts stated the website must be made accessible to individuals with disabilities who use computers, laptops, tablets, and smartphones because it is applicable under public accommodations. Well, as many of you may know, American case law is a little bit different from British case law. And as a result, this set precedent for every other supermarket and grocery store chain in the US, as well as most businesses, so that they could be sued for not making their online presence accessible. As many of you may also know, most of the online, most of the supermarkets and stuff we have in Britain are child companies of America, and very soon that the solutions to that, to make websites more accessible, were pushed across the pond to support people in using their websites as well. And finally, we've got on this side of the pond, we've got growing legal documentation on the need for accessibility. This is your problem. You're a business owner. You have to think about the different types of people who might be using your business, and those people may indeed have accessibility needs that need to be resolved to support them to use your product or indeed your website in general. So, take-home message number 2, aim for a website which is usable and accessible. It's your job to know who will be using your service. This means it's your responsibility to tell your developer about any additional aspects which might be required. Now, I'm not saying you have to know how to resolve these things. I'm not saying you have to suddenly become a technical expert overnight. But what I am saying is that you should know I might have customers who have X accessibility need. And you can speak with your developer or whoever might ultimately go on to perform your implementation to go through the technical aspects of this and to support you to resolve that. I can see there's 1 or 2 questions in the chat. I think it's probably easier if I just go through the slide set, because I've only got 1 more section, then a very quick demo, and then I'll take all the questions that people might have, and we can go from there. So don't think I'm ignoring you. I know you've got a question there, but I'll finish up and then I'll address them all, if that's all right. Finally, we come to this, the most exciting section, the prototyping for design. What is prototyping? Well, particularly in regards to development of a product or something, a prototype's an early sample of a model designed to test a design, a concept, or a process. And whenever you initialize the design of your product with a prototype, you begin on this journey, I guess, called prototyping. And this should be an interactive process where you build a prototype, you go away, you check how it works with users, you come back, you build another prototype, and you iterate until you have a final product. And I'm sure many of you have gone through this stage when thinking about the products you might deliver, either through the business accelerator or using your own business. There's a lot of reasons people use prototypes. They're very good in the early design phase. They allow to focus on important elements, particularly functionality and navigation. How do people use your site or application? Where do they go in order to use it? Do keep in mind that too much visualization is a bad thing. You're not meant to be the Pablo Picasso of wireframes. You're more meant to be using them to solve your, to develop your problem-solving skills and think about what's really important in your application. Now, when we talk about the web or about mobile phones, there are generally 3 stages to prototyping. You've got your paper-based design. We call these wireframes, and they're oriented around sketching out what you want or what you expect to be in the application. You can then design with publishing or PowerPoint tools, and we call these a mock-up. And finally, you get to the stage where you actually develop something, but it might not have any functionality. And this might be a simple HTML page, or it might be a web application, or it might indeed be a mobile phone app. So a wireframe might look a little bit like this. A mock-up, maybe something like that. And then by the time you're reaching the prototype, you're talking about, here's what the final web page will look like. You can see that the time you take to develop these different things increases alongside the technical difficulty. As clients, you're probably not expected to take part in too much of the prototyping or sometimes even the mock-up phase. However, it is really, really important that you make your presence felt in the wireframing phase. That's because prototyping can be done by absolutely anyone. There's no level of technical difficulty to sketching out what you expect from your as part of your design. It helps you with this upfront planning and thinking about, here's what my web presence should look like. Here's the information I should be giving to my potential customers, because anybody who visits that digital presence is a potential customer. Can be a really useful team exercise and help people all get on the same page, which is really important if you've got larger organizations and you want to make sure you're presenting a cohesive branding or a cohesive design. Frankly, it starts off with sketching, so changes are really quick and easy to do, and it can really be an effective way to communicate between stakeholders, your developer and your client, for example. A couple of things to remember: it really shouldn't be taking that long. It's time that could be spent elsewhere. You do want to give people enough detail so that they know what can be built, but not so much that you can't be flexible later. And most importantly, this isn't an art exercise. You're not there sketching for hours and making sure that shading is just right. It's something you use to share your vision with a developer, and that vision is really important. So, take-home message number 3, I would use your vision, I would use prototyping as a way to share your vision with the developer. Don't be afraid to pick up a pen and sketch things out. Or alternatively, you could use one of the tools such as Figma, which I'm going to very quickly introduce you to now. I've realized I've only shared this PowerPoint, so I'll change to sharing the entire screen. Can you all see my screen now that I've moved to the browser?
Yes.
Awesome. So what is Figma? Well, Figma's an online prototyping toolkit, basically. It allows you to design websites and mobile phone applications using pretty much the same functionality you would expect in something like PowerPoint, but with a few bells and whistles. It's also free for most things, certainly free for an individual login, and so you can create a number of design files. Now, creating something in Figma can be reasonably straightforward, and I'll talk you through creating a really simple prototype for a mobile phone application. I'm not here to give an introduction to Figma, just an idea to this is what you could do with it. Let's start by looking at the different frames. Now I have to move my chat up. You can see here we've got preset sizes for a range of different applications. That can be for mobile phones, and it could be iPhones, it could be Pixels, it could be Androids. We've got for tablets, we've got for desktops. We've even got for some social media plugins. The moment I'm interested in iPhone 13 Max, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create 2 very simple pages. Now that we've got these, I'll use tools to sort of give an indication of what I want them to look like. So I'll start by creating a button. I don't know why the text is tiny, but it is. It should be a lot bigger than that. Let's throw it up a bit and move it up to, let's say, 48. And we can change this font style as well. You can see there from the pop-up that I definitely expected. You can also add in Google Fonts if you have your own custom. And what we'll do is we'll just make a really simple splash screen for our application where it says, here you are, log in. We will group these together. So now we've just got a login application. You could imagine this might be a user's avatar, and this is a login. If we want, we can add rectangles or ellipses or something to enter login, but that's not really the important right now. And what we'll add is we'll just add some text saying you are logged in. When we move over to the prototype, this is where you can see the real power of Figma. So now that I'm in the prototype, I can link these frames together. I can choose the different types of interaction I support. But most importantly, I can look at, well, what will it look like on different devices? Once I've got that, I can click this play button up at the top. It will generate an interactive prototype of my design for me. Now, it takes a second to load. It's a free service, give it some credit. Now, this might look a little bit complex at the moment, but this is no more complex than doing it in something like PowerPoint, for example. And it even lets you adapt it to something that is you intend to use it on, be that a phone. When we get to our prototype, which should appear any second now, come on screen, being very slow. That's the trouble with doing things live. You can see we've got a realistic looking mobile phone that we can click on different bits of the page. When we click, it tells us we can interact here. And we can go, yeah, you are logged in. Wonderful. Okay, that's not the most fantastic demo that I've ever demonstrated to anybody ever. That was obviously a very simple thing. What happens if we look at something that's a bit more, shall we say, elaborate, that maybe has been worked on for a bit longer? And we'll click play there. I really should have had this one preloaded. Well, that'll just take a second. And again, this will take a couple of seconds. What's really neat about these things is you can share your prototype with potential clients, with potential sources of investment, with just about anybody you might want to share your prototype with. And this gives a very professional overview of a digital presence that you don't necessarily even have yet. All right, we're getting the warning. It should come any second now. Apologies, I have about 700 things open at the minute for a variety of reasons. And so things are slowing down ever so slightly on the old Kyle laptop. Yeah, you can share that prototype and have them interact. So what about this? This is on an 11 Pro Max, I think. We can tend to log in, scroll down, have a look through the different things. We can click and see where the different points of interactions are, even go through sample queries, as well as look at messages. And you can see even from this really quick example that this is a really, really useful tool for you to demonstrate to a variety of investors or anybody else for that matter, and show them that you have something that you're preparing this digital presence for. And this is something you can work together with your developer on so that you get the outcome that you actually want, and you make sure that you get something that is useful for your business. the final thing I wanted to end on, just a summary of take-home messages. So the take-home messages from today, think about what information users want from your website or application. Generally, this is the information that your business is designed to give them, or is designed to support to advertise products or whatever. Aim for a website which is both usable and accessible. Clients want to have something that is functional and they can find their way around. And you have legal and social responsibilities in order to make sure that your services are useful and can be used by absolutely everyone. When you're working with a developer or a development team, use prototyping and use tools like Figma to work together and find out something that works for you. Remember, users will remember a bad website much, much more clearly than they remember a good one. And that's important, because at the end of the day, it's not the developer's name, it's not the development team, it's not your, the guy you got to make your website that you get to put on blast on social media. It'll be your business that they associate with the experience, not the developer. So if there's anything you pull back from today, then I would hope it would be these things. That's kind of where I got to in regards to the different things I wanted to talk through. I'm happy to take any questions. I can see the chat's been filling up while I was sharing my screen. So will I just start going through them?
Yes, of course. So I can read them out to you if that helps, so that you can focus on your answers if you want. But we've had one from Gabriel, which is, share the slides afterwards, which is great. We can definitely do that one. And then Bob was asking about search engine optimization and how you can make sure you're ranked on page 1 of Google search. Okay. Any thoughts on that?
So in regards to Gabriel's question, absolutely. I'll give the slides to Ed, and Ed, you can share. And I can share 1 or 2 other things as well. In regards to your question, Bob, about search engine optimization, search engine optimization is really important, but again, it depends on what you expect to be the traffic coming into your business. If you think that people coming into your business are predominantly people who are going to think, I need to source X product or Y service, and go away and Google that, then you need to think carefully about search engine optimization, because it will be directly linked to, do I appear on the first page of Google? If I appear on the first page of Google, I have more customers coming in my door. However, it's a common misconception for many businesses that they think, yes, I definitely need that. That's not the case. Some businesses have a dedicated group of customers that they work with time and time again, or that they are serviced because of some agreement or something like that, which means that their website gets direct footfall traffic. And as a result, people are not moving and going through the search engines as often as they might. Typical examples of this tend to be things like specialist suppliers, for example. So suppliers that supply an extremely niche product that works for maybe 1 or 2 businesses that are their sole customer, but whose income from those customers tends to be enough to keep the business afloat. What tends to happen in those situations is you don't want search engine optimization is not as important, because you're working directly with your main customers, and the other customers you seek to get will probably be through word of mouth or through introduction. So before pursuing search engine optimization, which is an incredibly expensive process, I must say right now, think about, where do you expect your customer base to be? Are customers going to be Googling / Yahooing / whatever search engines you're poison? Are they going to be searching for me on these search engines? Or is my product such that it's quite specific? And as a result, yes, I need a web presence so that my dedicated customer base can reach me. But no, I don't need to be paying as much on search engine optimization. You will do it to some degree because you will want to be indexed by Google, but you may not necessarily want to do it as an immediate priority for your business if funds are needed elsewhere and you have a specific customer base. I can see someone saying, how much should we expect to pay for a website? It depends on the functionality that you want your website to do. If you have a static page that is just giving information about your products or services, then you may want to look into building this yourself using something like Wix or the various other drag and drop website retailers that exist. And in which case, you will typically have your charges broken down into two types. There will be your upfront costs, which usually involve buying the design, paying for any development that needs to happen, etc. And then there are, as always, there is running costs for a website, and these will include hosting of the website and any other things, anything you're paying a license to. The upfront cost for a website for a couple of pages, it can range from a couple of £100 a page to, you know, several developers offer will give you a 5-page web page for X £100, or it can go much, much higher. The running costs and hosting costs depend on the size of the website you have, but generally you should expect to pay anywhere between £10 a month for a very small website and up to around about 50 to hundreds of pounds a year if you have an extremely large one. If you are looking for an online web shop, that means that you're not just hosting a website, but you're hosting a whole infrastructure and your developer will talk you through this when they're thinking about what might be the most suitable things for you. But I was recently contacted to verify 2 quotes for a Shopify job. Shopify is one of the leading frameworks for creating commercial websites that have dedicated shop support and allow PayPal as a payment option, keep a record of your customers with secure login, and take care of the bank transactions for you. And they recommended, we tallied up the amount of work that would be involved, and I think we reached about £9,000 to £10,000 for a dedicated online store. I would like to design a simple website by myself, which I can regularly update with events, promotions. Is this easy to do, or would I have to pay someone to help with this? Lindsay, it depends how hands-on you want to be with the website process. If you want to go away and learn HTML and CSS, you can, of course, do that. There are a number of excellent, I would say, as a priority for your business, you probably don't need to do this unless this is very much tied to your product in some way. There are a number of excellent build-it-yourself website sort of services that exist now, including Wix, a number of others that have just completely gone out of my head. But these drag and drop websites are really, really useful for businesses looking to get off the ground. And they usually narrow everything down to a single monthly subscription cost. So if you're not looking to involve a shop in your website, then looking at that might be a really good way to do it. And they are really, really easy to maintain because they have the customizable elements to add new blog posts or new banners or new adverts, etc. Is the hierarchy of information and information architecture the same thing? No, in short. Information architecture is a slightly different thing. We typically use it to talk about, at least in my field, we talk about information architecture to talk about designing information systems. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It may well be different in a different field. The hierarchy of information is this idea of very important information at the top and working your way down to the more specific, more detailed descriptions of that information. What layout should a consulting business or organization use? Well, that's entirely up to you. I'm not here to tell you this is the silver bullet that will solve all of your business's problems. I'm here to tell you these are the things you should be thinking about. So when you're thinking about what layout you use for your website, I would be thinking about this is the product I expect to sell, or this is the product I want people to see, or even this is the branding for my company so people remember me. It's very typical to start with your branding right at the top, because most places think this is the most important thing that people see. You then usually have your typical navigation links or menus. You also have, then you tend to go down into your main products and services. Most things, when they get below the navigation menu, have a very big, usually a carousel or something like that, but a huge image. Think of like the Apple Store, for example, that has very large images of their phones on the very front page. And whenever you go to a product page, the product's always nice and big with its information, its title, right up there at the top. Something I should add, I realized I forgot when I was talking about Wix. If you are only after a static web page and you don't care about a custom domain name, then you can actually make free websites on both Google Pages and GitHub. GitHub is much more of a provide your own code sort of field, but with Google Pages, it's very similar to Wix with slightly reduced drag and drop functionality. But I've managed about 5 or 6 of them simultaneously, and they don't take much more than a couple hours to set up once you know what you're looking for. So it can be a really, really good way to get an initial digital presence out there and make sure that people are seeing you for what you are. The other thing about Google Pages, in answer to our SEO friend, is they're already indexed by Google. And there is already some SEO work done on the back end, not all of it, because as most people know, the first page of Google's usually paid or extremely competitive to get into. But it does mean that if people search for your business name specifically, they will usually find your Google pages very close to the top of the first page of Google. So there are some free things that you might want to look into there as well. Sorry, I'm a tremendously fast speaker and I love the sound of my own voice. So I do just tend to keep going and going. But are there any more questions, or would anybody like me to clarify anything? I've learned from my classes that silence means delirious happiness, enraptured joy. That's what silence means.
I like it. I'm going to take that. Anytime I hear silence, I'm like, yes, it just means round of applause, but you can't. Okay, amazing. Well, it's your last chance to fire in any questions to Kyle. If you have questions today, while he's doing that, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, no matter what website or app you're looking at, whether you have a business already or you're looking to develop one, the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group, we're always here to support. And we've just launched our Regional Accelerator program for applications. So if you have an app idea that you think could turn into a high scalable business, then do get in touch. There's a prize pot of up to £250,000 to be allocated out to the teams this year. And this time it's open to anyone living in Aberdeen. So you don't need to, Aberdeen or Aberdeenshire. So you don't need to be a student or staff member at RGU this time to apply. But of course, you still can be. So if you've sparked an idea and you'd like to take part, then just get in touch. You can go to rg.ac.uk/accelerator. And then aside from that, there's always more training resources. So if you go to the Entrepreneurship Toolkit, then you can find recordings from previous sessions that have happened throughout this year. So we've got another question from Bob. So what about the differences between HTML and CSS, i.e. WordPress?
Okay, so we're jumping in a tiny bit more technical. And before I answer Bob's question, can I just cheekily ask, Ed, will we just be allowed to enter again? Can we just do that?
Unfortunately, not with the same idea. Not with the same idea. New idea, though, if you have a different business, attend at or something.
Curse this attention to detail. So Bob, jumping in a little bit technical, but generally when we talk about designing websites and building websites, HTML and CSS is the go-to language. HTML is what we use to give a website its structure and content, whereas CSS is about the layout and its design. Now, both are completely independent languages. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. They're written in completely different ways. I'm not sure where WordPress comes in, other than maybe that it separates them and asks you to put in the HTML and CSS separately. But essentially what happens is with your HTML, you give the structure and the content for a given web page, and you write it all down following the HTML protocols, i.e. their rules. And this is where you decide, right, this is the text going in my website, this is the images that are going in, these are the forms that I'm going to have people fill out, etc. Here, this is where I link stuff in from YouTube or from Twitter or whatever that might be. CSS is where you then say, right, so I have all this content on my website, but right now it's got a white background and it's all just jumbled up one after the other in some kind of horrible order. And with CSS, this is where you put all the rules that say, okay, my website's going to have a blue background. I'm going to separate this text from everything else because it's my title. I'm going to separate this image from everything else because it's my logo. And I'm going to put them here on the page. And following through the different things with CSS, you basically take all the content, all the structure you created with HTML, and you give it rules to say, this is the design of the page and how it should be laid out. And that is, in a nutshell, without going too technical, the differences between HTML and CSS. All right.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to thank you. If anyone has any other questions, just drop me a message and I can fire them through to Kyle. There's loads of support out there if you need it, lots of resources. I know, I'm pretty sure Google do quite a lot of free courses on things similar-ish to this, maybe not web design quite, but that's a great tool that Kyle's talked you through today. If you do have any questions, then get in touch. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you at our next event. I don't think we have anything in particular coming up for the rest of the term, except our accelerator program. So get applying, and good luck with all of your business ideas and your websites and apps. And I'll see you all very soon. Goodbye.
All right.